upside down. Those of you guys that were at Simple Church on Sunday night, you guys saw the real kickoff, but this is kind of our kickoff for it. And the idea behind this series is when things begin to look a little bit different, right? So when things in our lives get turned upside down, right? So there's things that I think that like maybe we've known and we've understood, and it's just like the way that we've lived. But one of the crazy things about Christianity, one of the crazy things about Jesus, is he completely flips around like our worldview. Like he completely flips around the way that we think. And so I was like trying to make sense of this, right? I was trying to make sense of like, how do we talk about like upside down? Like what does it look like when our life is upside down? And so I thought maybe this was probably the easiest way to explain it. So if you guys want to go ahead and roll that video, let's jump into that. You're like, I don't want to be anywhere. Yeah, it's interesting. Like it always seems like it's one or the other, right? There's not like a whole lot of in between when it comes to roller coasters. It's like one or the other. But if you think about it, it's really about one of the only times in life that we feel like it's acceptable to be completely upside down, right? Like if you're driving in your car and all of a sudden you're upside down, something went wrong, right? Like if I'm holding a baby, because I feel like at one point I will have to give in and have a baby, and I'm just like holding them upside down, and that's just like how I carry them around. Like that's not right? That doesn't make sense. So like, it's interesting that like sometimes like this idea of upside down makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. But no matter what, the idea of being upside down is it's always the opposite, right? It's always a different path. It's always something that is uncommon. And I think when Jesus walked the earth, this is the best way to describe Jesus, is his way of thinking was upside down. It was a different direction than everybody else. It was uncommon to everybody else. And so during this series, we want to talk about a few of those ideas. We're going to talk about like a few of the ways that he just made everything look completely different for us. But tonight, I want to jump into like a topic that I think, man, all of us probably deal with, or it's something that we all desire or whatever. But it's friends, right? Like I think friends is like a topic that makes sense to us. I think there's a lot of us in here that like we want like a certain group of friends, right? And so like maybe like we're a little bit different. Like just like the roller coaster thing, some of us really like roller coasters, some of us don't. And so like even with like circles of friends, sometimes we have like different personalities with that, right? Some of us like huge groups of friends and we like to do everything together, right? Is anybody like that? Like the big group, you like to go around. And then some of us, man, we just like one or two really close friends. And that's like really all we want to hang out with is just those one or two close. Anybody more like in that range? So you're like a little bit of both, And so like, it's interesting, but no matter what, like we want friends, right? Like we desire friends. It's something that like we need. And I was thinking about this, and I think like the reason that we want friendship, the reason we want like a circle of friends is it really boils down to a couple things. I think number one, we want to feel like we're being backed, right? We want to feel like someone has our back. We want to know that our friends aren't talking smack about us behind our back ever. We want to know like our friends are like the ones that are sticking up for us when other people are, right? Like we want to know that like, man, if someone else says something about us, like our friends are going to have our back, right? They're there for us. They're going to do whatever it takes. And maybe it's something as simple as like, we know that they're always going to answer like our text, right? Or they're always going to like comment on our Facebook. They're always going to like our Instagram. But like, it's like those friends that like, we know will always have our back, right? When it's like a hard day, we know that we can just sit and watch Netflix with them or play video games or whatever, but they're always going to have our back. And I think this is like one of the huge things about friendship, man, is like we want to feel like there's someone out there or there's a group of people out there that have our back, right? I think number two is we want to be known. And this is what I mean by that, is I think we have a desire for people to know things about us. We want like a friend that they just know like what our desires are, right? They know what things we like and what things we don't like. We don't have to like pretend in front of them, right? Anybody like that? Like you have like your friends that you kind of pretend and put on like a little bit of a mask with. You're not totally open with. And then you have your friends that like your guard's just completely down with. And they're like your closest friends and they're your best friends. And why is that? It's because like we want to be known, right? We want to have that kind of friendship, the ones that we can hang out with and eat a ton of food and just have so much fun. And like, no matter what, we know that like they're there for us and they have our back. And we desire like those friendships. But like, I think if we're honest, like we look at like our friends, and I think most of us in here, if we're really honest, like we know what it's like to have the friends that aren't like that though, right? We know what it's like to like have the friend that like, man, if they could like ask out our ex and they would say yes, like they would probably do it, right? Like that friend that like, you know that like you've told them a bunch of your secrets and like they've swore that they would never tell them and then they do, right? Anybody ever had like stuff like that happen? Like you think that they're like gonna save you like a seat at lunch or whatever, and you get there and like there's no seats left, and you're like, this is awkward. I guess I'll like walk somewhere else. And you're like, man, I thought like you'd have my back there and like save me a spot. And like friends sometimes let us down, right? And I want to look at a story. It's a story that it centers around Jesus, and it's about 24 hours before he goes to the cross. So it's about 24 hours before he's executed. And so like, if you think about being Jesus and you think about being in this moment, like he knows that some bad things are about to happen to him, right? He knows that things are about to take a turn for the worse. He knows that the crowds aren't listening to him. They're kind of turning their back on him. He knows that the religious leaders are more and more after him to try and silence him. Like he knows that like his end is near. And I want you to think about that, man. Like if you were Jesus, and not to like overly put yourself in Jesus' shoes, but if you're Jesus, like you probably wouldn't feel the greatest about that, right? Like you love creation and you love humanity, so you are ready to give like your life for them, but like it's also very scary, right? It's also very difficult. And I imagine if I was Jesus, like that wouldn't necessarily be like the greatest feeling in the world to know that like my end is near, right? And I think one of the hardest things about it is his friends just seem to be oblivious to it. All of the disciples seem to like not even notice. Like no matter how much he warns them, no matter how much he tells them that it's coming, his friends just seem to be oblivious to it. And so here he is in like one of the toughest moments of his life right before the end. And it seems like they don't even pay attention to it. Like they don't even care about like the danger that's about to happen. It seems like they don't have his back at all. And so Jesus seems to be carrying like this burden, and he seems to be carrying it all by himself because his friends don't even seem to understand what's going on. Anybody ever felt like that? Any of you guys like had a moment that it seems like to be like one of the toughest moments that you've gone through, and it seems like your friends are nowhere to be found? Or they're off just doing their own thing and they're having their own fun. And you're like, man, do you not even realize like, man, I'm like going through some stuff. Like life is not easy for me right now. You guys ever been through that moment? And so like that's Jesus right now, right? And I think, man, if that was like me, maybe this is why Jesus is Jesus. If that was like me, like I'd get really frustrated at my friends. Like I'd be like start to distance myself from them, right? I'd be kind of ticked. I'd be a little peed off, and I'd be like, I just wouldn't even really want to talk to them and be like, man, if you don't get it, then I don't even really want to talk to you. And if you guys kind of have that mindset sometimes, you're like, dude, if you do not realize why I'm upset and what I'm going through, then like, whatever, man. You guys ever like that? That's how I would be in that moment. I'd be like, man, I'm frustrated that you don't realize. I've told you, I've warned you, like, man, this is about to be the end for me, and you don't even seem to care. But of course, Jesus is not like that. Instead, he did something that was completely upside down. If you guys have your Bibles, go ahead and turn to John 13. If you have them in your phone, go ahead and turn there. Does everybody have at least one or the other? You have like a Bible or you have it on your phone? I mean, I would encourage you, if you don't have it on your phone, like just download an app. There's so many free apps for it. Like just download an app just so you can check it out and read it. But it says this in John 13, 3-6. It says, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, wrapped a towel around his waist, and after that he poured water into a basin, and he began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. So this is Jesus, right? Man, he's about to be put to death. He's about to be executed. He knows that. He has told his disciples this is about to happen. He has warned them, and yet they don't even seem to notice. They don't even seem to care. They're just off doing their own thing. They're having their own fun. They're just oblivious to it. And yet Jesus, being Jesus, instead of being frustrated instead of being angry with his friends, instead of like pushing his friends aside or distancing himself, what does Jesus do in this moment? He begins to serve his friends. Isn't that nuts? Like that is completely the opposite of what you would think to do in that moment. But he chooses to honor his friends. He chooses to serve his friends. He chooses to bless his friends. And what's interesting to me is he seems to do it in the moment that they deserve it the least. And the moment that they have like the least honor towards him, the moment that they have like the least care towards him, that's the moment that he decides to like honor them the most. That's like the moment that he decides to love them the most. And so like if you know like the way that culture worked, is that the lowest servant, so every household or most households would have like a lowest servant. The lowest servant was the one that would wash the feet, right? And so like it was really uncommon for like the one that's like the leader, the one that's like acquired power, the one that's like acquired authority, the one that's like the leader of the group to scoop down and begin to wash the feet of everyone else. And so Jesus doesn't ask in those moments, in the moments when like his friends have let him down, in the moments that his friends don't even seem to care what he's about to go through, and then in the moments that his friends seem to be completely out of the loop and they seem to like not even worry about his struggle or his pain, in that moment, that is the moment that he decides to serve them. And he looks at them and he doesn't say, what can my friends do for me? But he says, what can I do for my friends? And that question, I think, it changed everything. It shifted the focus and it created like this upside down approach to how we like view our friends and how we view friendships. And I think like it's so easy sometimes like in our world to be more worried about like what our friends are doing for us, right? And we get more worried about like the times that like our friends have let us down. We get more worried about like the times that like our friends weren't there or we feel like they just didn't care. And the reality is like we should be looking at what can we do for our friends? How can we serve our friends? Because that's really the whole point. They're the ones that are closest to us. They're the ones that like we have the most influence with, right? Like if we really want to see like some sort of change in our culture, we really want to see some sort of change in our generation, who are we going to influence first? We're going to influence the ones that are closest to us. We're going to influence our friends. And I think like the world has told us, the world has like set up this culture of it's all about me. And so I think the reality is like when your friends let you down and when your friends hurt you, they are expecting you to push them away. Like they're ready for you to like have some beef with them or to start some drama with them. It is completely different. It is completely uncommon. It is completely upside down to decide to serve our friends no matter what. Whether they deserve it or not, that's the kind of love that we're going to show our friends. And I think when we do that, like it's crazy the amount of influence that we have with our friends, and it's insane like how quickly we can begin to change like our circle of friends just by doing what is unexpected. And see, after Jesus was finished washing like the feet of these disciples, which are probably like gross and gnarly because like all of their roads are made out of dirt and you know, animals pooped on it and stuff. Like, it's probably gross. And he gets down there, and after washing, like, their nasty feet, this is what he says in John 13, 14 through 15. He says this, "Now that I, your Lord, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you." So what does Jesus do? He sets, like, the example of serving those that are the closest to us. He sets the example of, even in his worst moment, here's Jesus, man, he is 24 hours away from an execution. He's like warned his buddies. He's told them a bunch of times, man, this is about to happen to me. And here they are. They don't even notice. They don't even seem to care. They're just doing their own thing. And instead of getting frustrated, instead of getting angry, he begins to serve them. And he says, this is what you should do too. In the moments that maybe you feel the most hurt, in the moments that you feel the most frustrated, if you serve your friends, what happens in those moments? I imagine like the disciples must have been pretty shocked. I mean, they're shocked to see like their teacher bend down and wash their feet. And I think like our friends would be too. Our friends would be shocked if we decided to like serve our friends in like the most crazy moments, in the moments that we feel like they've let us down, in the moments that they've hurt us, because that's living a life that's upside down. That's living a life that's so different than the world. This was an upside down way for people to see each other. And I think this is interesting because Jesus wasn't just trying to shock people. He was setting an example for his friends to follow. And I think like we can do the same. Like it starts with us, but like it expands out of that, right? And I think, man, if we start that in our circle of friends, if we say, man, I'm willing to serve and love my friends, like no matter what that looks like, whether they deserve it or not, like I'm going to love them and I'm going to serve them. We set the example for the rest of our friends. We begin to change like our circle of friends. We begin to like change our circle of influence. Jesus wasn't just trying to shock, but he was trying to teach. And I think the reality is like this is one of those things that it sounds like a great idea until we actually start doing it. Because I think in many ways, and I think maybe this is like one of those things that we've messed up in the church, is I think in many ways it's easier to serve those outside of our group of friends. I think in many ways it is easier to go do Adopt a Cause and stand in line with a bunch of strangers that we don't know and hand them groceries. I think it's easier in a lot of ways to go to Africa and do missionary work and then come back and feel great about ourselves. It's a lot more difficult to serve and love the ones that we see every day. The ones that really know our true lives, the ones that really know our motives, the ones that are our best friends, that know us in the good and the bad, those are actually the hardest people to serve. But those are the people that you have the most influence with. Because it works both ways, right? If you stand in line at Adopt a Cause with a stranger and hand them a bag of groceries, you're still a stranger to them, right? They don't know you. It was life-changing in the sense that it gave them food that they needed, but it didn't influence their life. But when you begin to do things for those in your circle of friends, you begin to like serve those in your circle of friends, even when they let you down, even when they hurt you. I mean, I think that's when something huge happens. I think that's why it's more difficult, because it's so much more powerful. When you're willing to do it to those that are around you every single day. But Jesus made it clear this is something that we should do with our friends that are closest to us. And so like it doesn't mean necessarily that like we go to school with like a bucket of water and a towel and start washing people's feet, because that would be weird. Don't do that. That would get you the Christian freak weirdo tag. Don't do that one. It doesn't even necessarily mean that we just do like some random act of violence. Jeez. It doesn't even mean that we do like a random act of like kindness for like one of our friends. I think it means much more than that. It's about becoming a people who serve our friends. It's about being aware of what they need. It's a mindset for looking for ways to serve our friends. And I think like it's pretty humbling when we think about it that some of the people that are the closest to us, some of the people that we claim to love the most, some of the people that we say, man, we want them to experience Jesus, and we say that the most, are the people that we serve the least. Have you ever thought about that? I think it's really interesting when we think about it, that sometimes those are that are just like in the arm's reach, right? That are like right there. Sometimes those are the people that we seem to serve in a very real and practical way the least. Those are the ones that like we kind of take for granted, and then we wonder why they take for granted us. But man, what happens if we really begin to serve our group of friends? Because I think many of us, if we're real about it, we probably have like within our group of friends plenty of people that aren't Christians. And what happens when we really begin to serve our circle? When we really say, man, I will like love my friends and I will serve them, and no matter what it looks like, no matter how hard it is, I'm going to show them that like this is how big of an influence Jesus is on my life, that he did it for his friends, and he said, this is the example I set, so I will do it for my friends. I will serve my friends. So I remember back when I was in college, imagine College West, or don't, one or the other. So I remember back when I was in college, and I had a buddy, I had a friend, but me and him like thought very different, right? And so there's things that like we just didn't agree on and we get in fights about. And one of the things that we didn't agree on at all was God, right? So like he believed in God and he loved God. And I really wanted nothing to do with God. I didn't really care. I thought it was totally fake. I thought it wasn't real. And I remember, man, if he ever like brought up Jesus or he brought up God, like my first reaction was just to make fun of him. And it was just to like rip him apart. And like there's this time that I'll never forget this. I thought this was like one of the craziest things. So any of you guys in here like paintballers? You like to paintball a little bit? So like when I was in college, so I went to college in Missouri, okay? So like when I was in college, paintballing was huge. And we actually like did intramural paintball, right? So you'd have like these contests and these tournaments and it was super cool. And I remember my first semester, they were gonna have like an intramural like paintball tournament. And like I wanted to be in it so bad, but it cost like $50 to get in. And I was like, man, I don't have that kind of money, that stinks. And so like I wasn't able to like do paintball. And I remember this friend of mine, like he came up to me and he's like, dude, I want you to be able to do it. I want you to be able to do paintball, so I'll pay for your way. And I remember like it totally caught me off guard because just the night before, he tried to talk to me about Jesus. And so like I just ripped him apart and like I was so mean to him and I was so cruel to him. And it was the very next day, he was like, man, I want to pay for you to be able to go do this. And then even more than that, it was like kind of a crazy feeling. He grabbed me and he goes, dude, let's just go to Walmart. And he takes me to Walmart and he bought me like all this camo gear. And like he decked me out for like the paintball tournament. And I remember thinking, this is so crazy because like, dude, you should hate me right now. Like I was a jerk to you. Like I cut you down in front of everyone. Like I wanted you to look stupid in front of like our friends. And your first response was to like do the thing that I wanted more than anything, to like go play paintball. And you didn't just stop there. Like you went and bought me like the clothes. You spent so much money just to show me like you wanted to honor me and respect me even in the moment that I didn't deserve it. And what's crazy is like he's one of those guys that was like one of the biggest influence for me coming to Christ because he didn't just talk about Jesus, but he showed Jesus. He showed what it looked like to serve your friends that maybe don't deserve it. He showed what it looked like to love the people that maybe don't deserve it. And it broke my walls. And I think this is the reality. I think all of us in here, we have friends that don't know Christ, that don't know Jesus. And the easiest way for us to show them what Jesus looks like is not to tell them about him. It's to not paint some sort of picture, but to show it with our lives, is to show it with the way that we serve them. Even when they've hurt us, even when they've like let us down, even when they've embarrassed us. When we decide, man, we're going to show you what Jesus looks like by serving you and loving you, it is amazing what we will do in our group of friends. You guys carry such an influence with your group, but it takes you doing something a little bit outside the box. It takes you doing something a little bit different than what culture would do. It takes you doing something a little upside down, and it takes you like serving the people that are the closest to you. It takes you like serving the people that maybe have let you down, that maybe have hurt you, that the ones that like you thought would have your back to the end, the ones that you thought you could always trust, that would always have your back, it would be okay for them to be known by you because like you could trust them with your secrets and they've let you down. Those friends, man, when you like love and serve them, it is amazing what you can do. It is amazing what Christ can do. And so this is what I will encourage you to do. As we get ready to worship, as we get ready to like worship Christ and enjoy like, man, just entering the presence of God, I would bet that each one of us right now probably have someone on our brain, right? We probably have someone in our heart. We have someone on our thoughts that's like, man, that is like the person that I could totally serve. Like they've hurt me and they've let me down, but this is like the person I need to reach out to. This is the person that like I can show what it looks like to serve. Like just like Jesus gave that example, I can do that. Man, I would encourage you as we get ready to worship to be thinking about that person and let God give you the courage to do that. Man, be praying for them underneath your breath. Be thinking about them and let God give you like a creative idea, a creative way to love them and to serve them. Because if we want to change the world, if we want to change our generation, it starts with those right next to us. It starts with our friends. It starts with those that we know by name, not strangers, but it starts right in our own midst.